OK，5:05已到，那我们正式开始本次的讲座。各位餐饮老板和各位参与本次会议的各位听众们，大家好，这里是吃货小分队的餐饮思想解疑会第5期，我是本次的主持人 Henry， 来自吃货小分队的 Henry。本期我们的主题是疫情之下餐饮消费心态与餐饮业的业主对策。那我们本次是邀请到了来自北美 Top 餐饮数据平台 Datassential 的 Ian O'Neill 来做分享。那么接下来我们想请 Ian 先给大家来做一个简单的自我介绍。Hi everyone, welcome to the 吃货 webinar on Chinese restaurant industry. So today we will talk about some insights that is shared by Top data platform Datassential, and today's co-host will be Ian O'Neill. He will share lots of insights about how Chinese restaurant, or say how in general consumers will think about this coronavirus situation, how they respond to it, and how Chinese owners should respond to it. Now, please allow us to give a few minutes to Ian to give some brief introduction about yourself and about Datassential. 下面请 Ian 来做一下简单的自我介绍。Ian, go ahead.
Thank you for having me, Henry, and thank you to everyone that's attending. I'm Ian O'Neill. I've been at Datassential for right around 6 years. Datassential is a market research company that focuses solely in the food service industry.
Okay, so would you mind sharing a little bit more information about Datassential? 我们想请 Ian O'Neill 讲多一些关于 Datassential 这个平台本身的相关情况，也就是作为北美一家 Top 的餐饮数据平台，他们本身是做什么的 ？Ian, go ahead.
Yes, Datassential works with most of the top food manufacturers in the U.S. and a large portion of the large national restaurant chains, and we supply them with insights on the menu and with consumer insights.
OK，Ian 这边介绍到 Datassential 主要是通过获得了大量的餐厅，包括菜单、包括供货商等等相关的这些信息，因此他们本身在 Datassential 之内是有一个非常丰富的数据库，用来支撑餐饮每一个餐厅去做改革，或者是去做菜单更新等等相关的一些行业趋势。同时，他们也通过餐饮相关的关系，能够很快的触达到数以千万计的美国消费者，所以他们能够在这次疫情期间去给到很多关于疫情之下美国的消费者究竟是怎么看、怎么想的一些问题。他们有发非常多的调查问卷，所以接下来我们就直接开始我们本次的一个数据分享。Okay, so let's jump directly to the third slide. 我们直接进入第3个 slide，来开始我们今天的一个数据分享。
Perfect, and I will pull it up on my end. So, Henry, Datassential did these reports and put these together in order to help folks in the food service restaurant industry to help understand what's going on as it relates to consumers in the United States specifically, and how this is maybe changing their perception of restaurants, and how these impacts not only with health but with economically, how this is going to affect their decision making in relation to food service and restaurants.
OK，Datassential 和 Ian 今天将会分享的这份报告，主要就是针对于他们所发放问卷调查的数以万计的美国消费者，他们在疫情期间究竟是抱着什么样的心态来去进行餐厅消费，去进行餐饮消费，包括他们是如何看待如果疫情结束了之后，餐厅需要做什么，我自己会做什么，来保持自己的个人健康以及保持整个餐饮行业的一个良性发展。Okay, Ian, next slide.
Yes. So I guess the next slide, and also before we jump in, these insights are across the board. No one knows your restaurants better than you, but hopefully when we go through these slides, you can take a few principles or a couple stats or insights, and you can apply them to your business.
OK， 我们都相信，就是说每一个餐厅的情况肯定是自己的餐厅最了解，每个人的流水等等各个方面都不太一样。但是我们是希望能够通过这个对美国数以万计的消费者的一个真实的调查问卷的结果，来能够让你从中获得1到2个对于自己店子能够有帮助的一些建议，那就是最好的了。OK, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess if you go to the next slide, Henry, we're going to talk about the money worries, correct? Yep. So this slide, we asked consumers, which were you more concerned about? And we asked, economic crisis or the public health crisis? And, overwhelmingly, 60% said that they were more worried about the health crisis than the economic crisis. And this data was fielded April 16th. So obviously things probably have maybe shifted a little bit, but that's kind of just to set a general understanding of where we are in this situation.
OK， 这一页 slide， Datassential 问消费者的一个问题是：你更担心的是什么？是经济状况还是健康卫生状况？那有62%，也就是半数以上的人都认为，卫生状况是他们更关心的。对于整个餐饮行业而说，他们个人的经济状况当然很重要，但是目前来说，公共卫生是他们更为担心的一个就餐的一个考虑。这个数据是4月15号的，但是可能会有一些改变，但是基本情况、基本的分布还是这样，他们更关心公共卫生的一个情况。OK， Ian。
Yeah. So, right now what this tells us is that, people are going to probably keep staying indoors for now. But at the same time, we'll see if this changes moving forward, that people will be, the tables will turn and maybe people will start being worried as things improve more about the economy than about the health aspect. And would you like me, Henry, to address this slide here?
I will translate a little bit.
Okay.
因为刚刚那个数据是来自于4月份的，那我们会想说，接下来进入5月到6月之后，是否可能会在这个数据上有一些改变？比如说，越来越多人开始担心他们的财政状况，而多于这个公共卫生的这个卫生状况。但是目前来看的话，整个趋势还是停留在刚刚我们所看到的这个饼图，也就是 pie chart 上。Okay, go ahead for this slide. Yeah.
Yes. For this slide, we asked U.S. consumers. And I will add for just all these slides, we asked a minimum of 1,000 U.S. consumers. And that allows us to extrapolate that out to the entire U.S. And so we know that, generally speaking across the U.S., this is how consumers feel about these situations. And when we look at it, we wanted to ask, do you believe in the future economic situation? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? How do you feel about this? And how is coronavirus impacting that? And if we look at from the 25% statistic, a minor recession, so not quite as bad as the financial crisis of 2008, if we look at that number and those 12% above it, right? So we have just about half of Americans saying that it's going to be not too bad, half of them saying it's going to be a minor recession, but not as bad as 2008. And then you have about the other half saying that it will be similar or worse than 2008. So there's still a lot of uncertainty.
OK， 这一页的主要的问题是 Datassential 问到了消费者，如何看待目前的这个疫情的情况，尤其是跟2008年当时美国的经济危机来做一个对比。那我们在这个图表上看到了，说有超过一半的人，甚至是3/4的人都认为这一定会带来经济衰退。那只不过是说这中间每个人对于经济衰退的程度的认识是不一样的。比如说有1/4的人都认为这个衰退将会是比较轻微的，但是有38%的人都会认为说这个衰退可能会比08年甚至以后要更加严重。所以我们认为美国的主流市场来说，对于这次疫情看的，尤其是在经济方面的角度，还是比较悲观，并且会把它做和08年的经济危机去做一个对比。Go ahead.
No, thank you, Henry. And I think, so going on to the next slide, when we talk about COVID and it being a health crisis, again, related to how consumers feel about their budgets and their personal economics, right? We see that, before Corona started, this really wasn't a concern, the financial situation. But as we've gone further into this, that has increased. So what this tells us is that, consumers are probably looking less likely to spend money on things, outside of necessities. So how do we get consumers into our restaurants? I would warn against just completely discounting and deals. We believe at Datassential that one of the best ways is to, show or provide value and innovation, as opposed to just discounting.
OK，这一页我们问到的问题是，目前对于消费者来说，你如何描述自己在这次疫情之前、之中和之后的财务状况？那我们明显看到的一个最典型的趋势就是说，即便是在疫情之后，仍然会有非常多的人超过了半数的人会去担心自己在疫情之后，即便比如说回到工作的区域也好等等，他们也会觉得自己的财政状况可能会有问题。因此 Datassential 这边给出的意见就是说，我们不要去给到太多的 discount， 也就是打折相关的东西，我们需要去提供餐厅更有价值的一些服务。那具体是哪些服务？我们现在我们会在接下来的几个页面中去讲到，因为接下来会讲到，其实用户看重的并不是 discount， 他们看重的会是其他的一些我们在后面的 slide 会讲到的一些服务。Go ahead. Yeah.
Yep. So this slide, I think, is a very big point. So we asked consumers, in this Corona situation improves, where will you start cutting back? As we're getting in the middle of this, as we're moving through it, where are you going to cut back on your spending? And so what this tells us is that grocery shopping is where people are spending their most of their money. So right now, we are not competing against other Chinese restaurants. We're not competing against other restaurants. We're actually competing against the grocery store and eating at home. So how can we inspire people to not cook from home, but to order at our restaurants?
OK， 这个问题其实讲的非常关键的一个问题，就是随着疫情可能的改善，或者是说随着这个危机的发展，那么我们的消费者究竟会是在哪些地方去减少他的开支，去增加他的开支？那么根据这个表中绿色的最明显的这一个数据来看，我们有51% 的人，会去增加他们在 grocery 的一个消费。也就是说，其实我们现在餐饮所对抗的并不是其他的餐厅，并不是你的同僚，你们所对抗的是用户，他要去在 grocery， 去在自己的超市买菜，在家里做。我们的竞争并不是餐厅与餐厅之间的竞争，而是用户在选择了新的消费习惯之后，去跟用户其他的消费习惯，比如说在家做饭，比如说在餐厅比如说在杂货店购物，这些消费习惯去做一个 competition， 去做一个竞赛和对比。Okay, go ahead.
For sure. So as we think about this, how do we differentiate ourselves from eating at home? We're talking about competing against eating at home. So to save money, consumers will restrict their dining habits, is what they're telling us here. So we ask consumers, how will consumers save money? And once social distancing eases, once things start letting up and things get better, they did say that, they might be cutting back on going out to eat. So how can we go beyond what just, food being fuel? We have to understand that food is also an occasion, it's entertainment, it's relaxation, things that cooking from home in the grocery store cannot provide.
OK， 在这一页就进而讲到了说消费者们究竟是怎么样去省钱，因为他们可能有财政危机，有这种个人花销上像我们刚刚讲到的消费习惯上的改变。于是很显然，他们中的第一个点确实就是说他们会减少去餐厅用餐，他们会把更多的钱去放在 grocery 或者是放在eating at home 上面这样子。对，所以我们希望餐厅在接下来的一些 slide， 我们也会不断的去强调一件事情，就是餐厅接下来要强调的是，我们不仅只提供食物，我们更提供的是全方位、更全面的一个就餐体验，包括更安全的就餐体验。Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, or it's giving mom a break from cooking, right?
Yeah.
So when we go to the next slide and we look at full service restaurants, right? So where you sit down and someone orders the food. So we said, who's likely to cut back, if budgets worsen, and who's likely to spend more if budgets improve. So meals from full service restaurants, we see that is another area that will benefit from improved financial situation. So there is some pent up demand for people to get out there and experience restaurants like normal. So as the economy is impacted, once things begin to go back to normal, consumers tell us that they want to get the full dining experience. They might have gotten pickup, they might have gotten, drive-through, fast food, but they will want that full experience once things do open back up.
OK，这个页面讲的非常重要的一个问题，就是说，如果当疫情开始慢慢减缓，并且人们开始更多的回到工作岗位，大家口袋里的钱开始变多了的时候，大家会选择去怎么样消费这些钱？这里面最重要的一点就是去 full service，fine dining 的这些 restaurant 去就餐。这个里面其实又回到了我们刚刚说的，就是餐厅接下来在继续开门的期间，一定要确保自己是提供最完整的一个就餐体验和就餐服务。因为当消费者有钱了之后，他们要体验的就不仅仅是食物，他们希望体验到的是我在餐厅所能够体验到，而 eat at home 也就是在家吃饭，或者是 drive through 这种方式，又或者是这种 take out 这种方式，他们所体验不到的食物。食物不仅仅只是一种满足热量的方式，在他们看来，去餐厅消费食物更多的是一种体验。所以有29%的人会选择说，一旦我有预算，我就去全方位的服务的餐厅就餐。但是这里面如果预算不足，我们看到最长的一条红色的 bar 是出去喝酒和去点一些开胃菜和甜品，也就是说他们会把他们的钱去更多的放到他们想吃的菜上面，而不是一些花里胡哨的 drink 或者是 appetizer 或者是 dessert 或者是 alcohol drink 这些东西上面去。对 ，Ian, please go ahead.
Yes. So this next slide addresses kind of, after quarantine, consumers are going to still retain their precautions. They're going to be a little bit scared. And I think the biggest and maybe most impactful one for some of your audience will be I'll still avoid self-serve food like buffets, salad bars, etc. 66% of consumers say that they're going to continue to be frightened by that environment. So what that tells us is places like hot pots, buffets, they're going to be impacted. So is there other formats? Maybe it's a pre-made bowl, or maybe it's a hot pot in the back of house that you bring to the front of the house. Or maybe you leave it on the menu as an option, but know that maybe less people are going to be interested in that.
OK，这一页讲到的问题是说，还是随着疫情结束之后，可能大家那个社交的距离会逐渐变小。那大家最认同这些选项中的哪一个？其中对于我们各位中餐厅来说，可能比较有用的一个是第一点，就是在疫情之后，餐厅的清洁度和食品安全对我来说更重要。那大家一定要注意"更重要"这个词，也就是说，即便现在我们在做很多防疫措施，但是对于疫情结束之后，这些餐厅所要做的保洁措施等等，一样都不能少。这个接下来会有一个专门的问题讲到，究竟用户在乎什么样的防疫措施，我们接下来会一定讲到。那其中还有第4点，就是避免自助餐、salad bar 等这些情况。因为我们知道有很多中餐，它还是会提供一些这种 buffet 或者是一些 salad bar， 像一些火锅等等，都会提供这个服务区域。但是有很多消费者就会说，这种服务区域的人太多，会让他们对于健康有一种 concern。所以我们建议在这一块 buffet 啊，或者是沙拉吧，或者是自取的餐吧等等这一块，一定也要有额外的这种健康或者是消疫的这种措施在里面。Yeah, please go ahead.
Yep, absolutely. And this next slide is a pretty quick one. The idea here just being that even after things get back to normal, we're going to continue to be worried about their health, and people are one of the main things, right? So people health risks, still scared to get infected or spread others. The second most popular response was, risk of contact, distance to other people. So, they were worried that restaurants might be too crowded for them. So making sure that the waiting areas in restaurants and the tables feel at a comfortable distance for restaurant goers to come back in.
OK， 这一页其实是一个非常直接的问题，就是说，即便疫情过去了之后，有什么还会让消费者不会去到你的餐厅坐下来吃饭的？第一位来说，依然还是担心这个健康风险。但是第2页其实是第2个选项，也就是42%的这个选项，其实是非常值得大家借鉴，就是说接触他人的风险和与他人的距离，也就是餐厅如果太拥挤，依然会是让他们很恐惧去这个餐厅吃饭的原因。所以这里Ian给出了2条建议，第一个就是要把桌子的距离去设置开来，最好是能够跟平常正常的这种就餐距离更大一些。第2个就是在等待的区域，把等待的区域画得更大。如果店内一旦出现可能有多人的情况，就让人在外等候，把这个 waiting area 完全设置开来。Yes, please go ahead.
Of course. So, and then if we look at the next slide, we ask consumers, as things get better, as things ease up, restrictions loosen, what's going to cause you to spend more at restaurants, right? And so a lot of it is very altruistic. They want to help restaurants and the economy recover. But we know that, sometimes people say that, but do something differently. And so when we look at the two other factors that are high on this list, wanting to socialize more, right? That goes hand in hand with food and wanting to see other people and talk to them. And then the other thing that I think is really important that I want to focus on is the foods that I can't be easily made at home. So a quarter of consumers want to eat foods that they can't make at home. And if we think about the general consumer in the US, they're probably not making Peking duck at home. They're not making egg rolls at home. They're not making sweet and sour soup at home. So think about prioritize dishes on your menu, and maybe promote the ones that are that you can't. Everyone can probably make fried rice at home, but it's probably a little different when it comes to like a Peking duck or an egg roll or something that's a little tougher to make at home.
Yeah. OK， 所以这一页主要是讲到，就是这个 Datassential 去问了一个问题，就是说什么原因会让你们在餐馆消费更多？那这里其实提供了一个比较乐观的答案。那这个乐观的答案就是消费者会说，我希望能够帮助餐厅去做经济复苏，能够希望帮助他们生意回正轨。但是伊恩这边其实同时也提到了说，people sometimes just don't behave as they in the way that in the way they say， 所以就是说，有的时候他们这么回答，但并不一定代表他们真的会去餐厅就餐。那这个 slide 其实最有借鉴意义的是在于第2点和第3点，也就是第一，他们想要更多的社交；第二，他们会想要去吃到家里不容易做的这些食物。那燕这边就提到了，如果自己的餐厅有一些确实大家在家里不太容易做出来的东西，比如说像北京烤鸭呀，或者是像一些大菜，那在这种情况下面，我们建议把它放到菜单的更前面去，把它作为自己家的这个招牌先推出去。而像炒饭呢，或者是一些普通的炒菜，如果大家在家里 eat at home、cook at home 就可以解决的事情，那我们不建议把它作为菜单上主要推出去的东西。Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Thanks, Henry. I realize you have a tough job, so I appreciate you. There's a lot there. So looking at maybe how consumers, how would you be most willing to support restaurants and their staff as they recover from COVID? So, what do they want to do more? They're saying, they say that they will, hopefully tip more servers afterwards, and they'll be visiting restaurants more to give them their business. And also, some other things as far as it goes to kind of, trying to tip and re-stimulate the economy. And that is only if, they have the money to do so, if the economic situation improves as well. So the other thing to keep in mind here is that with the increased traffic, you're going to get more engagement. So that means you'll get reviews, and you need to kind of be prepared for, people are the pent-up demand for going to restaurants. There's also going to be a demand for posting things on social media and reviewing things online. So, this slide has more to do with, how to get back to it, how consumers will give back to restaurants. But I think that I also want to mention that the social media and the pictures will also come as things start to recover.
OK， 这一页就是讲到，当消费者被问到说你究竟像刚上一页讲到 ，OK， 有很多人很有信心，说我愿意去帮助餐厅复工，帮助餐厅走出疫情。那具体是通过什么方式呢？那这个里面其实我们最应该关注的是前4个。首先第1个和第2个，也就是给更多的小费，more tipping， 或者是去更多的 restaurant，go to more restaurant， 这个当然是很多人在问卷里面会回答的事情，但是这个我们认为它当然是仅限于在整个经济恢复的过程中间确实有足够预算的那一部分人，就像我们这里小字有说的，可能是40岁及以上经济能力更强的一些人。但是我们更需要给餐厅强调的就是在第3和第4个选项，也就是说，当我们不确定这些人是不是真的会给到更多的 tipping， 或者是给到更多这种直接的金钱上的帮助的时候，我们去鼓励他们去做 social media engagement， 鼓励他们去把自己的这个review或者是自己的 picture 这些东西，自己的图片去放到药谱网站上面，这个是他们会非常愿意去做的一些事情，因为这不需要花费他们额外的成本，但是他们也有他们自己想要去 support 餐厅、去 support restaurant 的这么一个 mindset 在里面。那所以在疫情结束之后，或者是在重开店的这个过程中间，我们建议餐厅多去鼓励自己进店的消费者，通过 social media 的方式去 support 你自己的餐厅。Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this next slide's a quick one. It's just saying that this data was fielded and produced on April 23rd, so it's pretty recent, right? Within the last 2 weeks.
OK，接下来要分享的一部分的 slide 都是从4月23号，也就是一两周前的这个 survey 的结果出来的，所以是非常新的一些数据来跟大家做一个分享。
So this next slide kind of just talks about how people are feeling. So we've tracked the attitudes about their concern for coronavirus with just the general population week by week. So it starts on March 10th, and we see it escalate rapidly. I think on March 18th, that was kind of when there was some big national announcements, and I think right around then, the NBA decided to close their season and end it. And then once we started getting some of those national numbers produced on the 1st of April, then we saw, the biggest spike. And now we see it sort of normalize. And even in our most recent data that I saw today, it's even gone down a little bit. So that's kind of where we stand in the scope of people's concern.
OK， 这一页其实从30到47，这是从3月初到4月中下旬的这么一个人们心态的一个担忧的描述。那其实可以看到最高峰的时候发生在4月1号左右，也就是那个时候人们是最担心整个疫情的状况。那目前来说，包括Ian从今天拿到的数据来看，这个数据是在慢慢走低的，就是说尽管疫情在增加，或者是疫苗还是没有被研制出来，但是目前来说人们的担心是在缓慢的下降，随着这个局势的控制。当然这个下降我们认为依然是一个非常缓慢的过程。对 Go ahead.
Yes. And so understanding that concern is not the same for every consumer. We see that older consumers, what we call boomers, between the ages of 55 and 75 roughly, are the most concerned group of people about avoiding eating out. Excuse me. So younger generations are less concerned, probably because they know that they are less likely to be impacted by this. So when things start to reopen, it'll probably be younger consumers coming into the restaurants before it is the older ones, probably because of that concern about their health.
OK， 这一页其实是把不同年龄的人群去做一个比较，很简单，也就是说，对于55到75岁，也就是在美国的人口统计学里面叫做 baby boomer 的这一代来说，他们相对来说是更保守的一些人，对于完全不出去吃饭这件事情。而更年轻的一些人，包括Generation Z， 也就是5到25岁，或者是 Millennials，目前25到40岁的这批人来说，他们完全不出去吃饭的这种意愿是没有那么保守的，所以我们可能可以期待在接下来复工的这段过程中间，我们可以看到更多年轻的人群出来吃饭，而不是那些可能更有消费力但是更保守的这个中老年群体。Go ahead.
Yeah, and I did see a comment in the comments. This data is 1,000 respondents across the U.S. and it's balanced to the U.S. Census, so it is it's representative of all those different generations and demographics.
OK， 解释一下，这个数据的来源是大概是样本量大概是1000，然后整个样本的分布是根据美国人口统计局的整个样本美国人口的一个分布状况来说的，所以来进行采样，所以基本可以代表美国整体的一个人口群体的特征，并且根据这个人口群体的特征去问到了他们相应的问题。OK, let's go to next slide.
Yep. Thank you. Good question. So as health remains a top concern, we can still see that 60-40% split that we saw earlier of people are still more concerned about their health and the state of the economy.
OK， 这个 slide 就是在刚刚我们在第4页最开始第4页第5页的那个62%对38%的那个 slide 看到过的，也就是大家还是更关心公共安全多过于大家关心各自的经济危机。Go ahead.
So looking at when we fielded this in late April, we asked consumers, do they believe that May 1st is too soon to open? So ultimately, and not getting into politics, but we believe that this decision is going to be made primarily affected at the state level. So for instance, in Illinois, we have a shelter in place order until the end of May, where my brother who lives in Georgia, he can get a haircut tomorrow. Things are pretty open, but there are certain restrictions. But there is still consumer. So even if we are open, it doesn't mean that consumers are just going to flood right out and go in. There will still be some lag.
OK， 那这一页的话，就是当时在4月底去做这个调查的时候，当时是曾经有一个说法是说，可能5月1号就是会重新开放，但是其实即便在当时，我们刚刚讲到这个受问卷调查采访的是一个非常具有代表性的1000个人的美国主流人群，那也有72%的人认为有点太早了。那到目前为止，像伊恩所在的 Illinois 必须要关到5月底，但是像 Georgia 那样的呢，可能现在明天就可以出去剪头发了。所以每个州的情况不一样。但不管如何，我们认为这个关闭的时间肯定还是会往后延，并且即便有一些州被宣布了 reopen， 也不会代表有人群会全部回到餐厅等等，或者是回到外出的场合去进行就餐，一切都还是比较 conservative 的。对 ，Go ahead.
Yep. So slide 17. So when restaurants reopen, will you consider dining out? So this is important. Even after things, reopen, 41% of people saying, no way. Pretty much there's no way I would consider, and if they say no way I'm not going out, there's not much you can say that's going to convince them. So what we really need to focus on are the people that are saying, yes, I'm going to dine out right away, but really those 20% that say that maybe I would dine out. So we've got 59, almost 60% of people that are open to the idea of dining out once this is open. So how do we get those people that are on the fence to feel safe enough to come back out?
OK， 接下来从这一页开始，包括剩下的几页 slide， 我们都会着重讲一个问题，也就是当餐厅开业了之后，我们究竟可以用什么方式去抓住那些要么是决定我马上就会出去吃的，要么是我在观望我要不要出去吃的这一波人，包括措施，包括方法。因为这一页 slide 告诉我们的一件事情，就是在目前，当被问到你如果能够在疫情结束之后出去吃饭，究竟你会不会出去吃饭？有40%的人说我不可能马上考虑出去就餐，也就是有40%的人，各位的餐厅老板是很可能拿不到的。我们没有办法去拿到这40%人，并且去说服他们说你们现在可以出来吃饭。所以我们的着力点要放在剩下的60%人，也就是那些一定会出去吃饭，或者是他可能处在一种观望、一种思考、一种考虑的状态中，可能会出去吃饭的人。整个的市场大小，我们必然会丢掉一部分，但是我们要着重放在可能会出去吃饭的这一部分人。接下来这几页的 slide 就会讲到相关的一些建议措施。Go ahead.
Yes. And so now if we look at the biggest barrier is probably social distancing right now. So if we think about, people that are avoiding things, it's primarily for their health. It has less to do with economics and finances, but really more to do with their health and safety. So we have to start figuring out how do we want to prioritize those safety messages so that people do feel better about dining out. So we have to think, what is a way for consumers to feel safe in our restaurants? And I believe that social distance is the biggest concern, is not being too close to others.
OK， 这一页其实很显然就是最重要的一个数据，健康安全。因为当消费者被问到了说，如果要重新营业，你最担心的因素就是健康安全。那这一点上面，我们接下来还会讲到其他措施。那在伊恩看来，最重要的一个措施就是保持社交距离。Go ahead.
So this next slide, and this is a little difficult, so no worries if it's tough to translate, but the idea being that of the people that are open to dining out, right, so that previous 60%, though of the people that are saying, yeah, I'm open to dining out, I'm not against it, about half of them are saying that they want to eat normally, and half are saying that they want to go a little faster. They don't want to just sit in there and do the full experience. They want to kind of, they want to maybe best of both worlds. They want to dine in, but they just want it a little quicker, and they don't want to maybe linger there as long.
OK， 这一页其实是针对的刚刚我们2页之前，也就是第19页的时候讲到的一个6-4分的一个原则，也就是如果有40%的人已经拒绝了，说我一定不会 dine out， 一定不会在外面吃饭，那剩下60%的人究竟是想要一种什么样的体验？这60%考虑可能会出去吃饭的人中间，很有意思的是，有50%的人都说我需要的并不是一个完整的就餐体验，我想要的是更快的用餐体验。也就是对于有一部分餐厅来说，我们去建议你对你的菜单，对于你进店的一个消费体验去做一个加速，不管是更快的出餐速度也好，还是去提供更精简的菜单也好，能够让这些消费者通过更快的就餐体验去确保一种更安全的消费感，也是非常重要的。OK， Ian?
So when we ask diners kind of about this, what did they want to see from other consumers, right? What, not what the restaurants can do, but what can other consumers do to make them feel safe about dining out? And washing their hands frequently is what they hope and expect other consumers to be doing. And then the second thing being maintaining their distance. So, is there a way for our restaurants to facilitate that, right? Maybe it's, we've seen this where they're, Xing out a table here or there, or maybe it's putting hand sanitizer out in the restaurant so that people can feel that, at any time, they can see other people sanitizing their hands.
OK， 这一页是站在消费者的角度去说，你觉得其他的消费者，也就是当你走进一家餐厅的时候，你希望整个群体在做一些什么，会让我觉得这家餐厅非常的安全，非常的干净，可以让我觉得在这家餐厅吃饭是放心的。那这个里面几个 top 的选项，其实都是餐厅作为餐厅业主可以去教育大家的。第一个就是鼓励大家去多洗手，于是可以放一些洗手液，并且把自己的桌子摆开等等。那通过这些方式去让每一个消费者都感觉到，除我以外的消费者都有在很注意公共卫生、公共安全。对 ，OK，next slide。
Yeah, and so when we're trying to prioritize what those things are that the restaurants can do to make people feel better, and right, we have to remember that it's not just actually doing it, but it's kind of having consumers see and believe that it is healthier, whether it is or not. People need to see it to feel comfortable. So things that are not probably beneficial that consumers say is not very important to them is, asking them if they feel sick, or knowing that you're asking consumers, taking their temperature. That those kind of things you can probably avoid. It's not as important. But things like social distancing, hand sanitization as they walk into the restaurant, and people not crowding is probably the top priority.
OK， 这一页就回到了餐厅业主的角度，也就是说，消费者被问到说，你究竟希望餐厅业主能够保持一种什么样的这种安全措施？那其中最重要的还是这个保持社交距离，也就是说，他们会希望他们走进的这个餐厅里面，每一个人相互之间的距离都是很合理的，同时大家也会有这种hand sanitizer 啊、干洗洗手液来洗手等等，类似于这样的一些措施。OK，go ahead.
So, as initially as consumers are coming back in, they're going to have a little more patience with the restaurant. At least we hope so, right? But they've told us that, they understand that if people have to enforce some additional rules, that they're willing to go there, and that actually might make them more comfortable if there are some rules enforced.
Yes, OK， 这一页其实跟上一页一样，也就是讲到说，如果我们采取一些额外的措施，餐厅业主这边，那消费者他其实至少在他们的回答里面，他们是觉得我可以去忍受的，我是有耐心的，为了吃这顿饭，我愿意容忍餐厅去做一些额外的措施，比如说需要我在外面等啊，或者是我的 big party 不能够被 reserve 呀，或者是说我可能需要一些其他的问题等等，就是他们会有更强的这种忍耐心去忍耐餐厅所采取的一些必要的措施。只要你把这些措施做出来给消费者看，消费者多多少少还是会买你们的账。OK， 我们 OK，let's go to the last 3 slides, I think.
Yep. So if we look at the people that are on the fence about coming out, and there's a lot of data on this slide, but I think the main takeaway here is that they need to visibly see that things are being clean, that there's social distance, and these are things that people have to when they visualize in their mind a restaurant that they want to go out to during these times or right after Corona times, they're restaurants that are being cleaned constantly, and that they can actually see things being sanitized and social distancing. So similar to the slide before, but this is specific to the people that are kind of on the fence.
OK， 最后的这3页，我个人觉得，包括吃货这边也觉得，是对于所有的餐饮业主来说，是最需要可能去做一个截屏，或者是做一个记录，并且一项一项的来看店里是否有有实现的可能性。因为这一页的问题就讲到说，哪些预防措施会让那些可能来吃饭，就是还在动摇的人会去来吃饭，也就是说，什么样的措施会让他们觉得你这家餐厅是值得可信的？那在这个角度上面，这个问卷已经列出了一些措施，而这其中像这一页所列出的，都是消费者觉得非常高亮的答案。他们觉得，如果一个餐厅做到了这些措施，那他就会更可能去这个餐厅就餐。这里面就包括了对桌面进行消毒、公共区域消毒、员工检测、桌子之间的距离、员工测体温、每张桌子都提供湿巾、提供消毒巾，或者是提供这种洗手液等等这些措施。就是这些预防措施，大家可以去看看，如果想要开业，我自己究竟能不能够实现？如果我实现，我要把哪几点先做好？并且我们也建议所有的餐厅在去做这些措施的时候，一定要做给消费者看，这个很实际、很直接。但是如果你只是背后默默清理，不通过合适的方式，不管是药也好，或者是其他的媒体也好，或者是通过在用户就餐的期间去把那些东西做出来，消费者是不知道的。所以要让消费者相信的话，一定要让他们看到你在做这些事情。对 ，OK。
Yeah, and on the next slide, we basically see the opposite, is what are some things that are not as important for customers, things that maybe is not worth the time implementing, like only serving canned beverages or sealed beverages, things like contactless payment. These are things that consumers are less worried about, along with even wearing masks or gloves, a little less important than the other two things on the other side of the coin.
OK， 这一页其实，因为你们可以看到最左边的这个 bar 是越来越低的，而最中间的 bar 是越来越高的，也就意味着上一页是我们吃货，包括耶人这边建议餐厅一定要纳入考虑重开业时候的一些措施。但是这一页是在我们看来，也许不值得投入那么多的金钱和时间，因为在用户看来，在消费者看来，这些措施是属于有的话更好，但是没有我其实并不会强求的一些措施，比如说。提前下单，或者是只供应密封的饮料，或者是无接触付款等等这些东西。如果这些事情对于消费者来说并不是那么最基础的，那我们建议这部分的时间和精力可以先不花，我们还是要把刚刚上一页我们认为或者说消费者认为最重要的事情先去完成。OK。
So then we talk a little bit here about those independent restaurants. Specifically, we ask consumers, if restaurants were to open for dine-in, which would you be most likely to trust more to ensure that you're safe? And most would choose an independent, just by a slim margin, would choose an independent restaurant over a large chain restaurant to do a better job at keeping them safe. So there is some trust. So the idea is to try to gain the trust of those consumers that are maybe even a little more interested in dining local.
OK， 其实这个问题，我觉得对于各位中餐馆的这个老板来说是一个还不错的信息，因为我们比较了这种个体餐馆、个体经营和这种连锁店，那么其实会有更多的消费者会更相信个体经营的餐馆，他们会觉得其实个体经营的餐馆干净程度、卫生程度，在某些程度上还会超过那些全国连锁的餐饮品牌。
OK。And so my final key things to remember, the last slide, are that, restaurants are competing with eating at home and the grocery store at the moment. So how do we kind of separate ourselves and make it, it goes beyond food to that experience of socializing and relaxation and some other things that the restaurant can do for you that you don't have to do your own dishes at a restaurant, right? And then messaging around cleanliness. They want to see it. Just because you show up at a restaurant, you can't just assume that it's clean, but some of those things going on will help consumers get over that hump. And then consumers want to support local business. So as many of the people here are local restaurant owners, make sure that you emphasize in your messaging that you are also part of the community in a local restaurant, and hopefully that goodwill from consumers will come back to you.
OK， 最后是3个非常重要的这个 key points， 我们希望本次会议最后再提炼出来的一些。首先，第一个，我们已经通过之前的所有数据来表明，你并不是在和其他的餐厅竞争，这一点一定要记清楚。因为正常时间，那当然餐饮行业有很多同行之间的竞争，这很正常。但是在这个特殊的时间，其实消费者的习惯已经被改变了。同时，我们之前看到他们的预算、他们的生活方式全部都被改变了。那在这种情况下，你们其实并不是正在跟隔壁的餐厅竞争，你们作为一个火锅店不是在跟火锅店竞争，你们作为一个早茶店不是在跟早茶店竞争，其实你们都是在跟和家里吃饭或者是说外卖等等这一件事情、这一种消费场景来进行竞争。所以你们要强调的并不是自己比别的餐厅便宜，或者是自己比别的餐厅更早开门，而是说我究竟能够跟你在家里吃饭有什么不同的体验，这就是我们一直在强调的一种吃饭的体验感，一种吃饭的安全感的这么一个因素。第二个还是老问题，就是清洁度和味道，在现在这种情况下已经同样重要。所以Ian一直在强调说 ，You should let people say it. People need to say it. People need to say how clean you are. 所以我们一定要把我们餐厅能做到的措施去展现给用户，展现给消费者，并且把这个作为自己宣传、作为自己重新开张的卖点之一。甚至比口味更重要的一个卖点。第3个就是因为消费者表达了我们愿意去支持个体餐厅，我们愿意去支持我们当地重开的这些愿意重开的这些餐厅，所以请您强调您自己是一个本地的餐饮业主，您重开了为了服务什么什么样的社区，为了什么什么样的一种理念，把自己重开的这么一种想法去包装出去，去讲出去，那么用户就有更大的可能是买单。Okay, I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. Well done, Henry.
Thank you. I am trying my best. So,
very good.
Yeah, so I'll ask it. We have a Q&A session because we have collected some questions, as you can see in the Zoom chat list.
Yes.
So I think we will go through it one by one, and okay, let's start from the first one.
So that's, are there any differences between various consumer demographic groups, for example, comparing Asian Americans to other demographic groups? Right now, we have not looked at the data by specific demographics as it relates to ethnicity, but we have looked at age, and we do know that, a lot of times the younger consumers are less concerned and the older consumers are more concerned about dining out. Whereas, the younger consumers happen to typically have less money than the older consumers.
OK， 那个目前 Datassential 这边还没有关于族裔上特别多明确的数据，但是正如我们之前所讲到的，在年龄层次上面是有非常不一样的这种区分的。在年轻的群体中间，我们认为它是没有那么保守的，在25岁到40岁，甚至是5到25岁这个群体中间，他们会更愿意在餐厅开业了之后重新出去尝试。也就是说，我们整个餐厅的取向可以更年轻一些，但是更中老年一些的消费者，他们可能会更加保守一些。OK, let's go to question 2.
Yep. So since the lockdown, delivery and pickup has begun. So yes, I believe that even as lockdown decreases, pickup and delivery are going to maintain dominant, and they will continue to be a bigger part of our business, even, I think long term, just because, there's going to be people that are still scared to go into restaurants.
OK， 在Ian这边的角度看来，即便接下来的这种 lockdown 这种全程封锁，包括这种限制令在逐步的放松，但是在未来很长的一段时间之内，外卖依然会是非常占主要的一种方式。也就是说，外卖依然会拿很多的市场，而这种时候如果重开餐厅的话，我们也不需要去把堂食去能够一下提高到去代替外卖，甚至是超越外卖的这么一种假想的一种未来的状况。在未来很长时间内，外卖还是会是一个非常 dominant、非常占主要地位的一种消费方式。Okay, let's go to question 3.
Question 3. So that is about asking if it's requiring guests to wear masks. That's an interesting question. I know that from the data that we just shared, that's not really a main focus for keeping people out of restaurants. At the same time, I understand you're trying to keep your own staff safe. So I think it wouldn't be crazy to have masks and available to wear in the restaurant, and maybe encouraging people to wear one if they feel comfortable. But I'm not sure if a requirement, I'm not sure how people might feel about it, especially if they have to pull it down between bites and things like that.
OK， 燕这边的想法是说，如果有餐厅有这个货，我们建议你是可以把口罩放在店里面，包括鼓励他们去戴，但是他不认为说 requirement 这件事情是非常必要的。对 ，OK，question four.
How long will it take for dine-in business recovery? I would tend to agree with that, just because we don't know how long, and it also depends on your state. If you're stuck in a state that's going to be on lockdown for another month, and then after that, it's only slowly going to loosen back up, you might want to start thinking about that, right? Especially as, think about monthly costs, and knowing that maybe it's going to be 3 or 4 months until it's back to normal. Where if you're in a state that's already open, like Georgia or maybe even potentially Colorado, that maybe you don't have to think about something like that.
OK， 燕这边的意思就是说，这其实非常看你所在的位置。如果你是在 Georgia、乔治亚或者是在 Colorado 这种州，那么因为现在已经基本放开政策了，所以其实没有必要去把堂食改成外卖。但是如果是在一些有1个月甚至更长的封锁令这种前提下的州，那我们觉得你是可以把你所谓的堂食继续去改成外卖的。OK， let's just because we have talked about question 5 and we need to save some time.
Okay.
So let's go to question 6.
Individual dine-in coffee shops or bars. That's the most dangerous. Yeah, because delivery is very tough for those, right? So some things I have seen is kind of kits for making your own, whether it's coffee and they're delivering. So they've really changed the position of their business, some bars and coffee shops, because many states you can't deliver alcohol, but maybe you can you can send the ingredients to some of these people. Some of the laws are changing on alcohol delivery by state. So that is something to check with your state. I think in Texas, that has been loosened up a little bit. So I would check on that.
OK， 在这一块的话，确实像燕所说的，有很多州、很多企业，就是因为这种东西没有办法去外带，所以他们现在暂时处于一个很 stuck 的状态。那么他一个建议就是说，我们可以直接去买 ingredients， 比如说像 coffee 这种，就直接去买 ingredients。那如果是酒精的话，现在暂时确实是没有办法，可能要咨询当地的一个法律的状况，看看法律上是不是可能会有一些改善，不然会比较难。OK， the next question. Let's say question 8. So,
how do you define comfortable distance
for customers?
Another good question. Right, it probably does depend on the consumer. I know that we're talking about 6 feet as kind of the standard. So restaurants that I have seen pictures of that have been doing this are kind of doing every other table as a way to kind of maintain that distance. And then in the waiting areas, putting marks on the ground to know that you're 6 feet away from the person in front of you.
OK， 他刚刚提到了2种，一个就是在外面的话直接画线6 feet， 每一个6 feet 画一条线。那另外一种就是 every other table， 也就是每隔一桌我才安排一桌，在大家正常的这种桌位已经确定了的情况下，我就不每一桌的去填，那我每隔一桌才会安排一个位置。对 ，OK， so the next question, there's no, question 9. Customers don't like to be checked their temperature with a question mark.
Yeah, that's something that when people thought of what will get them back into restaurants, having that is not something that's really going to change their mind about going out or not going out to eat. So I wouldn't say don't do it, but it's not something that's really going to tip the scale to get people in.
OK，燕刚刚就援引了我们那个 slide 分析过的数据，也就是说，查温度这件事情呢，我们不会建议不去做，但是我们不认为这是一个会改变他们是否要出去就餐，或者是否要到这个地方而不是去另外一个地方就餐的一种决定性因素，它不会改变这种 balance。所以，如果在这件事上没有一定要做的必要，我们认为可以不把重心放在测温度这件事上，因为它确实不能根本性的改变一些想法。Okay, question 10. I think we need to speed up a little bit.
Yeah. So going to be increase in price food. I can't say for certain, but I know that potentially with beef, we've seen some plants shut down. So there could be obviously some increase in prices for things like, I know Smithfield is a big food manufacturer and they've shut down a few plants and they are beef and even some pork.
OK，Ian 刚刚就是说，目前来说它并没有所有的信息，但是至少有一部分产品，比如说牛肉，因为有一些种植场已经有一些畜牧场已经关闭了，那所以像牛肉等相关的价格肯定还是会有一些增长的。Okay, question 11. When order food, do servers need to wear masks and keep social distancing? Weird situation there.
Definitely. I understand you don't want to like serve your food on a very long stick. So I think if your servers do wear masks, I think it is appropriate to put the messaging so that people can see that they're doing it for their safety, not your safety, so that people don't feel like your staff is sick, that they're doing it you're doing it to protect your staff. And I think that's okay. People might want, when it comes to the table, less interaction and maybe just dropping it off and moving away.
OK， 燕是非常赞同这一点，就是说，对于服务员来说的话，不管是出于保护服务员本身的卫生，还是出于向消费者去展现，像我们一直提到的，你一定要向消费者展现我的餐厅是非常干净的这么一个概念，这么一个场景。所以，如果去给服务员能够配备这些 mask， 我们觉得是 OK 的，是推荐这么做的。同时，因为想要去化解服务员和顾客之间的一个可能存在的心理隔阂，那比如说我们把食物放下之后，不去做更多的交流，就直接转身离开，或者是说一些其他的方式是有助于增强这个消费者和服务员之间的兴趣。OK，
question 13.
13, yeah, that's right.
So made to order dessert. My recommendation there might be, maybe with the warmer months, it becomes a to-go window or a pickup window. And instead of made to order, maybe, hey, here are 3 or 4 builds. And that way people don't feel like they have to pick everything out. That's like, here's the Chicago ice cream and, it's these 4 ingredients.
OK， Ian 这边的建议就是说，你这边直接先把东西精简，并且去做好，能够去减少人们的一些选择。就是说 ，OK， 我这个东西是由这些来做的 ，OK， 我直接展示给大家看，然后这样子的话，去减少一个等待啊，包括各种去沟通、去交接的一些时间。OK， question 14.
Food prep like Blue Apron. That's very difficult and probably is very specific to your restaurant, your food costs and things like that. I've seen, there's a couple here in Chicago that seem to have done it successfully. I would say maybe if you're a higher end, more expensive restaurant, people might be willing to pay a premium. But it is tough, I think, going that route because there's just so many competitors.
OK， 关于是否要像 Blue Apron 这种餐厅去直接去做一种我把食物打包好、准备好，然后让顾客回家自己去做的这么一种状态，在Ian看来，如果是比较高端，确实是比较精致的食材，他建议这么去做。但是否则的话，他不建议更多的餐厅去做这种可能感觉已经打包好、只要回家炒一炒的这种方式，因为在这个行业里面实在是有太多的竞争者。Okay, the next question is kitchen condition a big concern for customers? For example, cooks' health status. 就是说餐厅的状况会不会是对于用户来说是一个 big concern? Yeah, please go ahead.
It's a very good question, and I think people are concerned. We didn't ask this, so I don't know this from the data specifically, but I would say as it relates to your restaurant, maybe if you feel that is something that you want to talk about, if you guys take the temperature of your staff and you make sure that your staff is healthy, maybe share that with the consumers coming into the restaurant.
OK，OK， 就是还是刚刚我们提到的那个点，就是我们如果有为了我们的后厨或者是我们的厨师去做了相应的防疫措施，不管我们做了什么，我们都一定要展现出来给用户看，给消费者看。同时，一眼看来虽然没有直接的数据支持，但他认为后厨的一个清洁的程度是一个很好的可以向消费者去展现的一个点，所以他觉得在可以的情况下，我们也可以这么去做。OK，
Robots.
Robot, yeah, AI. It's a very cool
I love AI, and I think it's super cool. Whose job is it to sanitize the robots afterwards, right? I think consumers are probably open to it, but again, it probably depends on the type of restaurant you are.
OK， Ian 说他非常喜欢 AI 的这个 idea， 但是又回到那个问题，就是说谁会去清理这个 robots， 谁会去清理这些东西？所以回到根本来说，其实还是一个关于卫生健康的一个担心问题。如果卫生健康能得到保障，那么其他的都可以去尝试。但如果卫生健康，比如说这个机器人是怎么清理啊，等等这些问题不能够得到更好的处理的话，那我们不认为AI 是一个很好的一个措施。Yeah。OK， 最后还是我们这次会议基本到目前为止就结束了。那我们想欢迎大家去关注我们参考消息这个公众号，我们随后的这些回顾还有整个的 PPT 都会发上这个地方，请大家一定要务必关注，或者是添加参考消息的小助手，这个里面他也会随时分享更多的信息。OK, Ian, I think that's pretty much it for today's slide share. Thank you so much. Would you mind wrap up a little bit?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Really big thanks to Henry. You can check out our website. It is all the coronavirus. It's only in English, but you can download all of our reports and listen to our webinars with this link.
OK， 这个里面是 Datassential 的 website， 还有他本人的 email address。如果有相关的任何问题的话，可以随时发 email 给他。那同时 Datassential 因为是吃货，最先去了解到这个平台，他们这个平台上有非常多的公开的资源，非常多的 information，lots of free materials to share。所以欢迎大家去这个网站上面多去 browse， 多去浏览。OK, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. You got to give yourself credit. You did a great job.
Thank you so much. You too. Love to work with you. Hope we can have the next webinar soon. Yep.
Absolutely. Take it easy. Have a great day. Stay safe.
谢谢。